We're smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Lagos Talks 981. And it's time for us to get into a conversation this morning, something that affects you, everyone. If you're breathing, man, plants, animal, all that informed the intro with the song by but Michael Jackson of blessed memory doing the Earth song for us, but that relates to the environment, and that's where we're heading this morning. 4 minutes past 9 already, and our guest is waiting to help us get a better understanding of what the significance of today is all about, and going forward, what as a people who are here, who don't have a plan B yet until they can securely move us to moon or Mars, very, you know, affordable. We have this place to live and make it as comfortable as it can get. So today is known as the World Environment Day with the theme, Our Land, Our Future. This day is dedicated to raising awareness about pressing environmental issues and promoting action towards a more sustainable environment and future. But then a UN report reveals that many communities, now bringing it back home, Niger Delta, have lost or fear losing their homes due to coastal erosion. Throw in oil exploration and all that, you would know Ogoni issues and all of that, you would begin to get an idea. As a matter of fact, the United States Agency for International Development, Africa's most populous, saying that Africa's most populous country is the ninth highest contributor to plastic pollution globally. The country contributes 2.5 million metric tons of plastic to waste annually, and it just goes on and on. But to make meaning of all of this, we make welcome our special guest this morning on Lagos Talks 981, Rebecca Oluwaponmile, development researcher with a focus on climate change and its diverse effects on Lagos and the world. Good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Omatseye. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you very
Welcome.
much for having me, and happy World Environmental Day to everyone. It's our land and our future, so we have to all get into this. This is it. We cannot just leave this to the government or to policymakers or people that we look up to as leaders. We all need to get involved. My grandma used to say something like, "Oh, whether you're young or whether you're old, we all just need to get involved. Like we all need to put our hands into this. This is in short to make it more sustainable because we're really working as we are working for the next generation. So even the next generation, millennials, Gen Z, Alpha generation, every generation that's currently alive. We all, in short, if we can put our animals to work, if we can put our cats, our goats, everyone to work, because something else I found out recently is that cows actually contribute more to greenhouse gas emission than we humans. Isn't that interesting?
See, when I discovered that fact, how can someone, just that creature, four-legged, producing milk, how can it eat green grasses, give out milk, and then that's not green? But then just eating grass alone, look at what it does to the environment.
Like, just look at what it does. And then I've been wondering, oh, okay, maybe it's just us human beings,
Yeah.
maybe through our flying around, with airplanes, the cars that we use, and all the other things that we use. We human beings, we're not contributing so much to greenhouse gas as
And
much
it
as
does
that
that and it
animal.
goes moo, and then you think it's not doing much damage to the world.
So when I was at the event where we actually talked about it, we were talking about it like, okay, so how can we cut out cows? And I'm like, me, I'm an African, no, I don't know how I can.
Yeah. I'll get
Maybe
back to some
everyone.
I'll get back to some cultural practices, especially in East Africa, I think Sudan, the Maasai region, where
Mhm.
cows are seen as symbol of wealth. They're actually worshipped. So I will look at how they impact in the environment because we've identified that as a point
Yeah.
now. But let's get into it's been like 51 years since the United Nations saw it important for this day to be set aside and celebrated. So that was in 1973, if I go back in time. And so let's get a better sense of the significance of this day.
Okay, so this day is a day where we actually talk about the issues that we're currently facing, especially when it comes to the environment. So today, today especially, we're really focusing on land reforestation. We're also focusing on stopping desertification, and we're also focusing on building drought resilience. So the first one, which is land restoration, we all know that, of course, to get food for humans, we have to sow seed, we have to plant, and then we have to eat. But over time, people haven't been like restoring their land or keeping their, I think, let me just bring the Bible perspective into this. I think there was a law back in the day, like historically, where okay, you have to farm for 7 years and then leave the land to restore itself for another 7 years. But recently, due to we're now a lot of people in this world, so people who farm, and we can also see that even when people stop farming, when farmers stop farming, we become sort of hungry. Like, you know how we say, there'll be just no food.
Yeah.
So we need to give more time for our land to restore, but we're not doing that because we need food, right? So that's one issue. And then we also need to stop desertification, because when it's too hot in some climates, there are some places that, like, for instance, the Sahara Desert, for instance, and as if you check well, you can see that the desert is expanding when it should actually be reducing, so that we have more lands to farm, so that people have more lands to move to keep the current land that they are using to restore. Do you see the effects that this all of this is having on each other? And then building resilience to drought. So what then happens is that it also becomes it rains really heavily, and then our lands, soil erosion happens, and then takes the soil that is good for planting, it takes it to wherever, whether back into the ocean, and then it becomes an issue with planting as well. So we decide then to keep that land that we should be restoring, we start to fertilize it and overuse it, and then that's not sustainable. Because how is that sustainable? The next generation can't use that land because we have already used it. So how? What are the things that we can do to stop all of these things?
So let's get into, I understand the point of the land you're talking about, and something, drops off from that. The echo I get is the issue, land is a limited resource. And
Yes.
so, and then that then arises the demand for it. And since
Yeah.
it doesn't increase, pressure is on it. But
Yeah.
first, let's also bring in what are the components that make up this environment beyond the land where we are seated right now or have built on right now? What else constitutes this environment, or is just the land the environment?
Yeah, the reason why I'm speaking specifically about land is because for this year, that's what the UN Environment Day is focusing on. However, our environment isn't just about land. We have our rivers, we have our ocean. I think tomorrow is World Ocean Day. So you can see that this month is actually about bringing awareness to our environment, even the atmosphere,
Mm,
all of there's no part of us that we shouldn't be concerned about. If you remember COVID, when COVID hit, we had to start putting on face masks. And before then, people were already putting on face masks because there is always dust in the atmosphere. Even out and this would be outside of Nigeria. In I think in countries like China, they were already putting on face mask even before COVID. And if you look at the historical perspective of people who cover their faces in like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they started doing that because of dust, really. So, and okay, I mean, people always think that Egypt is not in Africa, but yeah, Egypt is actually in
it
Africa.
is.
So even we in Nigeria, because the Sahara Desert is actually not far from us, to be honest, we should be putting on face masks because it gets really dusty. And okay, even I'm not sure what it looked like during Amatan this season, but the last Amatan, there were a lot of dust like in the atmosphere, and we had to be wondering what's going on and all of that. So our environment isn't just about our lands. The focus is just on lands this year. So we have to make sure that okay, even the sun is also in our atmosphere. So how is that having an adverse effect on us? How is the ocean having an effect on us? So all of those things have their own effect on us. So now, what are the effects that we are having on them? It's like, it's like this type of relationship that I don't want to call it a negative relationship, but it's like, okay, what you throw into the environment is what the environment will throw back at you. So, yeah.
So this brings me to now you're like the doctor, the patient is the earth and the environment, and you're picking up issues, and we now see it is, well, sick. And there's a term that has become a currency right now known as climate change. And
Yeah.
that in itself covers one of the issues you talked about, both of them, even as it relates to the levels of the sea you talked about, and where you have the desert now pushing its way into places that used to be green and had with forests back in the days.
Yeah.
So let's get into that aspect because it's so important now that we've had a couple of conferences already named after COP, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
relating to this. So walk us through how this climate change is becoming an issue that affects, the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Omashe. So yeah, that club is like, that place where everyone like goes and then, you make your demands. People think that, I think it's a place where you make negotiations about climate justice and all of that. And in Nigeria, there's actually this COYEC as well, where young people actually, I think it's Conference of Youth on Environment. Yeah, I think that's the name. I think it's actually happening today. So you actually go there to understand, to have a better understanding of how climate change, of these effects that climate change is having all around the world. For instance, we talked about drought, but drought doesn't just happen. And then when drought even happens, it's not just happening, it's a fancy word, drought, flooding, and all of that. No, it has an effect on how we eat, on what we eat.
I might ask you to just hold the thought there. You would, on the other side, you help us break it into. It's just so interesting how you just make this conversation flow so seamlessly. But then I just would crave your indulgence there. If you
Yeah.
just joined in, you can be part of the conversation on the other side. Make sure you send us a message on what you think about the environmental practices that are, causing harmful effect to man while we live here. Send those thoughts across to 0809 4440981. You can also catch a live stream this morning on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Subscribe to it. We've got a special guest, Rebecca Oluwaponmile, a development researcher with focus on climate change and its adverse effect this morning. We love music, we love life. Correct food, they always give me joy. Now, anytime when they cook like this, like they always season them with no cube. Come add correct vegetables inside. Ugu, tatasheo, shombo, onions. So I know they put. Now it make my pikin them. They always enjoy my cooking.
Daddy, I never available. I want more.
You see, now all your food with correct vegetables. Come season them with no cubes. But that will get delicious taste. Today, chop better. The smooth ride home. Tomorrow, right here on your dials. 98.1.
I love my radio. My radio is my all-day companion.
Vex's rhythm, making you move. It's all about your big songs.
You right kind of music, and of course,
It's all about your fresh news and information.
all information I can get, or news I can get, from the house to the car to meetings.
And it's all about the great ingredients you need for your journey home.
Lots of horrendous traffic stress. You're going to relax.
The smooth drive home, right here every weekday from 4 p.m.
I just want to listen all day long.
Love music. Love life.
Hey, it just feels. We're smooth 98.1 FM. It's still Lagos Talks 981. And this morning, the conversation is about World Environment Day 2024. And that's what it is. June 5th every year is always World Environment Day. Time for the speeches. And do people ever make meaning after they leave those conferences? These are the issues arising, how we can sustain this environment. But this year's theme is land restoration, stopping desertification, and building drought resilience. And our guest, Rebecca, it's back to you. You were speaking on climate change and how it's becoming a major currency and what people do now to demand climate justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Omashe. So yeah, I was speaking about that, but I also want to like build a background to this, so people really understand, just in case anyone is actually just joining us. So, there's flooding is an issue. Then there's drought. Is not just a fancy word. I mean, I think when I was in primary school, I used to say, "Oh, drought." That it's not like a fancy word. Just use it. Let me just straight into the debate. When we're talking about when I was just learning about climate change
Yes.
as a young person. And then heavy rainfalls. So heavy rainfalls, leads to flooding, especially when houses have been built in waterways, right? What leads people into building houses in waterways? Most of the houses that are in waterways, especially in cities, right, are houses that have been built in slum area, houses that have not been planned for. Why were those houses not planned for? Or why would people have to build houses in spaces that were not planned for? Because most of the time, climate change has already affected them in the village, right? I'm going to give an example of an older person that I know. So climate change had affected their farm in the village. So they had to move from the village to a city in Lagos, right? And start building houses in areas like Badia, some parts of Agege, some riverine areas where okay, we know that houses shouldn't be built in that place. However, climate change had already made their lands dry, so they are unable to farm. Of course, they have to leave their village to look for, to look for better lives and better sources of livelihood. So they had to move to those slum areas and start living there, right? Okay, I'm trying to paint a picture here. So then they move to slum area and start living in slum area. So from living in slum area, they block the waterways, and then when it rains, of course, because the city is already paved with cement and all of that, the ground is unable to soak in the water. So the water can't go into the land. So the water starts flowing downwards. And you see, most of the time, the part of the slum is usually downwards. So the water flows in that direction and fills up their houses. And then, of course, when the water is not flowing properly, the government will then say, why is this water not flowing now? Then the government will do what? The government will go to their house and go and pull down their houses. And then they become homeless. From becoming homeless, and most of the time, people who live in slum, their businesses are usually in their house or just in front of their compound. And then so they lose their source of livelihood as well. So this doesn't just affect the older people, it affects their children as well, because then their children are unable to go to school. So their children are unable to go to school. One way or the other, they probably become miscreants, and then they probably become anything other than becoming successful or great in life, because they have been unable to go to school due to the effect that climate change had on their, not even on them, directly on their generation, on their ancestry. So look at the ripple effects that climate change, especially flooding, would have on people, especially people who live in cities.
Now you've touched on the social implication of the climate change and in this regard. So it will just make meaning for us to also delve into the security aspects of this
Yeah,
climate change in
yeah.
itself. So lead it into that.
Okay, so now the security aspect of it is that, look, So you really don't have anything secure at this point. Climate change does not allow you to have any security because even your land that you've fertilized properly, that I'm going to plant on this land and I'm going to have more harvest and I'm going to sell whatever I make. You know what? When the flooding from climate change comes, it does not allow you to say, oh, I'm secured in my investment or I'm secured in my home. When it comes, I think that there was it 2 years ago
Yeah.
when there was flooding on this farm in the north and it wiped out all of the rice. And then in short, it affected us, we citizens, sef, because we became hungry. Because, okay, we were buying rice for maybe 25,000 naira. Until now, I don't think that issue has been resolved because climate change is not an issue that one person has a solution to it and they just touch it and everything will just go away. That's the reason why we're calling on everybody. All hands needs to be on deck. There was a lady recently who organized a cleaning effort for 10 hours around Okuku. I think that was on Saturday or on Sunday. So I'm not really sure if everyone in that area joined her. Maybe they just thought that, oh, she was just doing something out of the blues. But anywhere you see someone carrying out a cleanup, anywhere you see someone doing advocacy and saying, please stop throwing deaths in the ocean, please stop throwing deaths around, please join them. Join them. Even I like to give some credit to Loma. They are doing a great job, and a lot of organizations who are now doing a lot of work in climate change and especially waste management. It's not something we shouldn't just sit down and fold our arms and be watching what they are doing. We need to ask them, what can I do? If you don't even ask what can you do, you know what you are doing. We need to start bringing those words, reuse, rethink. Regard is even one of it because you need to regard an old clothes. I remember when during my primary school days when we used to do cultural dance. My grandma's Asha from way back to make sure that that's what I reuse. We don't buy a new one. So those are some of the things that we can do to mitigate this effect. While we talking about land restoration, stopping desertification and building drought resilience, those might be advice for people who don't basically live in cities. We live in the city. Lagos is a city. So those might be advice for people who, okay, maybe they do farms. I'm not sure if there are a lot of farms in Lagos right now, but the effects that climate change and the environment is having on we that live in cities is a different study on its own. This is not just a wide thing. It's a different topic on its own. But we need to actually get involved because the 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 environmental degradation that comes from the city what is even more than what is being done in rural areas. So these are the things that we really need to focus on. We really need to zoom into how this affects us. I think when we know how it affects us, then we'll know what to do.
Now, zooming into it as you've recommended, so that means Lagos is it's just on the edge of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So we have the Bar Beach, we see the lagoon. So that's a typical example to see
Yeah.
what it's like in terms of the surge we're experiencing, flood, and all of it. So let's look at how waste from all our activities are ending up right into the Atlantic and
Yeah.
what the impact would be on that environment and the ecosystem that the ocean supports.
Yeah, we're already seeing the effects. We are even already seeing the effects. People who study, I think it's Neoma, people who study the marine and all that, they've started to say that, okay, our ocean is rising, oh. Our ocean is rising, oh. And when they are telling you that the ocean is rising, they are not telling you that the ocean is rising because it's puff puff. It's not puff puff. It's rising because when the ocean will enter inside people's house, So this is not something to say so that you be afraid. It's something to mention so that you know that whatever one is doing is having an adverse effect on the environment. Um, like I mentioned earlier, when the ocean when it surges, there are people who lose their lives, and then there are also people who lose their source of livelihood. For instance, people who might lose their life are people who maybe live in riverine area. So there are people who live in riverine area. I hope we all know that it's not everyone who is able to afford living in in prime areas. Some people actually live in these areas because those are the places that they can afford, or most likely that's also closer to their source of livelihood. Like for instance, fishermen and fisherwomen, people who roast fish and all of that. So they live close to their sources of livelihood. So these people, let's say that the ocean surge, flooding and all of that, it will probably affect them first because they are on the bottom cadre of of the economy right now. How about people who now live in prime areas? Have you heard about the level of flooding in Ikoyi and VI recently? It when those areas when they flood, right? It affects the wall of the house. And there's this thing that they call it. I think the house or the walls turn green, and then you breathe in that it causes you some kind of other infections and all of that. Recently, I even found out that some of the effects that this climate change issue, like dryness and maybe wetness, actually causes skin infections. So you can see some people that they have some redness on their body, they have some scales on their skin and all of that. These are all some of these are actually effects of climate change that climate change is actually having on us. As a city, we need to get more involved. We cannot just fold our hands and think, oh, things are going to keep going on well. No, young people, older people, we need to get involved. What are the things that we're doing in the corners of our house that people don't know that we're not doing outside?
When we return now on the other side, I would like you to take, there was recently this action by the by the government that, there was a ban in place now for styrofoam uh, to check plastic,
Yeah.
contaminating the earth and the environment by extension of the lagoon, the aquatic life and all that, but you speak to it on the other side.
Love music, love life. Smooth 98.1. What it is? What takes a plate of jollof rice to the next level of goodness? Is it when it is cooked with no seasoning cubes for that sumptuous taste? Or when you serve it with correct Nigerian salad, cabbage, carrots, lettuce, and a bit of kidney beans? It's both. Season your jollof with the rich taste of no cubes and serve with plenty of vegetables. So go ahead and elevate your meals. Today, eat for good. 98.1.
The best of everything in the morning. More. A little less conversation, a little more action. Weekday mornings, 6 till 10.
We're smooth 98.1 FM. It's still Lagos Talks 981, and we've got our guest. It's still World Environment Day. Wishing you World Environment Day, but in wishing you that, the question behind it is, what are you doing to your immediate environment to help mitigate, reduce the impact of these issues we've identified? Desertification, flooding, clogging the drains. We're in the thick of the rainy season already. And so you were mentioning the styrofoam ban, and how do you think that has impacted the environment in Lagos?
Yeah, thank you again, and thank you to our members of audience. Okay, so styrofoams and plastic. When we're talking about styrofoams, I like to not just think about the one that we're using to eat. I like to also think about the ones that we're using to pack our radio and our television and all of that. to disposing all of, how are you disposing those? Because you can be pointing at other people and say, they are using styrofoam to eat. They are using kinika, kinika. You bought radio yesterday. You bought television yesterday. So how did you dispose the container and that styrofoam that came with the TV and the radio? All those shoes that you are buying, all of those things. We are very good at pointing fingers. But what about the one that you are doing? We need to face ourselves at this point now. Okay, what are the things that I'm doing? Reusable containers. There are some people that will say, oh, I don't, when I buy food, I only use takeaway. So, and then when the takeaway has a different color or something, they say, I cannot use any takeaway that is not the same color. I don't even like to use plates because when I use plates, I have to wash it. Why can't you wash it? You should you should wash your plates. Even the takeaway pack that you're using, you should actually wash it. But because we don't want to reuse things, we don't want to reduce how we use things. Some people, when they even eat, they will make sure that they leave half of the portion on their plate just to show that they are rich. Yes, can afford it. They will eat half. They leave the remaining half. Can't you eat all the food? Even chew the bone. I know some people that when they eat, they actually make sure that they clear their plate. It does not remain one seat. So those are things we need to check the ways that even like you mentioned earlier, that the culture of some people in Kenya is that the number of cows that they have signifies how rich they are. Why? Why do we want to show? What is this show off about? I heard that there are even some people that they have like 3 or 4 private jets. Why? What is the essence of it? How many are you going to fly? How many private jets are you going to fly? How many beds are you going to sleep on? How many of these things do you actually use? How many clothes are you going to wear at the same time? Why do you feel the need to buy all of those brands and just keep them in your house until they are bad, until they are spoiled, and then you have to then throw them away? You cannot reuse them. You cannot rewear them. I think the Met Gala this year was really about people wearing I'm not sure if they were wearing waste or whether they were wearing
Oh,
recycled
I will
clothes.
remember that there was a lady who went to the Met Gala with sand. Sand was the dress she wore. That's Tyler from South Africa. The dress she wore was made of sand in a way. That's what she saw. Yeah,
You
it was
see, yeah,
encouraged to
so
encourage that.
those are ways that even stars, people that we see as celebrities and all, these are the ways that they are bringing attention to, the things that we need to do to call us, to bring our attention, because those are the people that we watch on TV and we see them on our social media platforms. They are calling our attention to how the things that we're doing are having adverse effect on the earth. And it's not even what we are doing. When I say we, I don't mean we as Africans or we as Nigerians or we as people who live in cities, but people, especially people who live in the global north. We need to call this exactly how it is. People who live in the developed world, people who created some of the machines that we have today that we're using to make life simpler, like our cars and all of that. But while we're thinking of that, we also mentioned the effect that cows also have on on greenhouse gas. So we need to rethink. Maybe it's more chicken that we'll be eating now or more eggs, but that's really something for every one of us to
Some
think
per-
about, because
some
even me, I love beef. I love
some
my cow
person
leg.
the beef right now is threatening the plate of some persons this morning for breakfast, and they're saying, this compass, this table you're shaking, I have my
You
beef
know,
there. Oh, please,
my
oh, be
corned beef
careful.
and all the things that I use beef to do. My
Yes.
my cow leg pepper soup and all of that. You now tell me that I'm with people protesting against removing cows from this world. I'm with you guys, everyone. I'm with you.
Okay. So now this leads me to the bigger persons. You touched on them a bit now. The first world order, as they want to call, as they are referred to often, because as
Yeah.
the summit, the environment summit will be held today in Saudi Arabia. That's where it's being held. We understand they would take the front row and they will
Yeah.
begin to make all
Mm-hmm.
the speeches and point to the
Mm-hmm.
third world to say this they must do. So let's look at some of those industrialization and the terms of energy we use, like take for example petrol, crude oil, and all that.
Yeah.
The impact it has on
Yeah.
the wider environment and how we can mitigate them using Nigeria as an example right now. The Niger Delta in focus.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that question, because I also wanted to talk about when the fuel subsidy was removed by the federal government. Did you see how dry some of our roads were? People weren't even going out. So you could tell that all the time that we go out and drive our cars and all of that, that maybe there's even really nothing that we're going there to do. Look, for instance, we're having this interview on Zoom. Imagine if I had had to drive from my house, or flown, with a plane or something down to your studio. Look at the contribution that's making to environmental degradation. So, now back to the fact that getting this crude oil that turns into fuel for cars and for generators, for planes and all of these things, it causes environmental degradation to those areas, for instance Ogoni, and other areas around the world as well, where we're getting this fuel from. So think about, so whenever you want to use something, me these days now, whenever I want to use something, I think about, okay, where is this thing from? Okay, this, for instance, this my jotter, I've been using it for up to a year now. By September, it will be a year that I got this jotter. It's not like I don't have things that I'm writing on it, but what I do is I cut it out, because I know that this is from a tree. So a tree had to be felled for me to get this paper. So how am I going to manage it? So when you buy fuel, think about the effect that that fuel that you are using, that you are just using it and you're just spilling it on the floor, and you're just turning on the generator. You're even using the generator for 24 hours. Inside this economy, you are using, okay, let's even say that you can afford this, but what effect did getting this fuel have on the people who live in the areas where crude oil was gotten from? So these are things that we need to actually be thinking about. And that was why I mentioned that we need to rethink. That's another word. Rethink how we use things. Rethink how we just call up things like, okay, go and get me fuel. Okay, go and buy me a new dress. Think about how much getting that dress actually, how much you took from the environment. So now that's the word. How much you actually took from the environment to get that dress. So the cotton that will be used, the material that will be used to make that dress. Trust me, it was gotten from the ground, from the soil, because yeah,
Animals
cotton had to
also
grow.
some animals would have to go to for some furs coats we wear.
Yes, some animals as well. Things that you cannot even create though. You have to, and some people say, oh, when you're thinking that way, it's poverty mentality. It's poverty mentality. Okay, continue. The effect that that's going to have, and that's why we call it sustainable development. That, so that we are doing things that does not affect the next generation, because it will affect the next generation. The things that we do right now, the things that our fathers, our grandparents, the older generation, the things that they did, that's why we're where we are today. We didn't have electricity, I think maybe, well, 1,000 years ago, we didn't have electricity. And then we got electricity. 1,000 years ago, we didn't have airplanes. And then we have airplanes. Look at where we've gotten to today, the effect that flying around. I'm not sure how much airplanes contribute to the effects that we have in the environment now.
Carbon emission,
uh
yes, surely they do. It
yeah,
does.
yeah, so that's there. Our cars, these days we actually have to measure, okay, if I walk, is it better? If I use my bicycle, is it better? So there are other options. People make it look like, oh, if I don't have a car, there's no way for me to get to where I'm going. No, there are ways for you to get to where you're going. There even there are ways to calculate how many hours or how many minutes it will take you for you to take a walk. Sometimes even when you take the bus and when you walk, it's around the same number of minutes that it will take you, because you probably sit down in traffic for some time, and then so these options are there. Let's not restrict ourselves or restrict our minds.
So
These options are there.
in about a minute before, I just like you to help us also understand. It seemed not just there's something known as the seasons we grew up knowing and not regular any longer. Is this also
Oh,
connected to
yeah.
climate change?
Yes, yes, this is connected to climate change, and this is happening everywhere in the world. Some places where it's supposed to be spring or summer, then you see that, oh, it's probably still winter and it's still cold. And then there's some, I think right now it should be raining, but we're not seeing a lot of rain. But we're even growing up, they used to say something like, when it rains, we'll be angry that it's raining too much because our houses get flooded. And when it doesn't rain, we'll be wondering that, why is everywhere so hot? So
Yeah.
these things have been happening, but it's like they are becoming worse at this time, because if it doesn't rain when it should rain, then we won't get harvest when we should get harvest, and then when we don't get harvest when we should get harvest, food become more expensive. And we might think that, oh, I'm a city girl, I live in the city, I'm a city boy, I live in the city, this does not really affect me. Trust me, it does, because food will become more expensive. More people who live in rural areas will troop into the city, and then the city will become more crowded and over urbanized, and then we start having issues with with our healthcare and many other things. It's like that.
All right, we'll return to just bring the conversation to a close shortly. So we just ask you to keep your thoughts coming on to 0809 444 0981. I see a couple of messages on our WhatsApp platform, and they're waiting. Rebecca, just get ready. Got some messages waiting already. But then just remember, stay tuned to Smooth 98.1 FM. It is the World Environment Day.
Just on your dial, just the way you like it.
That's smooth music.
Just like you. Music is life, and life is music. Here on Smooth 98.1. Go by it. Let's take down.
From the fields to the courts, we shine the spotlight on the women in sports. The Ladies in Sports Conference 2024 is igniting the light, inspiring greatness one woman at a time. We're expanding the business for women in sports. Join us at the Marriott Hotel Ikeja from the 5th to the 7th of June 2024. Don't miss the conference. It's gonna be prime. This event is proudly sponsored by Stanbic IBTC, Bet Niger Foundation, Mamador, and Smooth 98.1. Meals have a way of taking us on a journey. And when you add plenty of vegetables like a fork, and season for the rich taste of non-seasoning cubes. Even better. So go ahead and elevate your meals with more vegetables and the rich taste of no cubes. Today, eat for good.
Now, that's the sound of a busy, big city. A city you build your lifetime upon. But there's just one problem. A critical question you have failed to ask yourself. Why do bad things happen? That's because we live in a beautifully imperfect world of humans and the carefree. But life happens to everyone. To understand how to survive the slippery slopes of life, tune in to the Atsenuwa Safe Cruise on everything insurance that you need to know while your clock still ticks. Get the big picture? Atsenuwa Safe Cruise on Smooth 98.1, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6:10 p.m.
We're smooth 98.1 FM. It's exactly 11 minutes before it is 10 o'clock, and we've got about some 6 minutes before we bring this conversation to a close. World Environment Day is what it's all about today, and you need to reflect on the actions and what you can do to mitigate some of these issues that have been raised by the authorities. The certification, flooding, and restoration of the land is also a big issue if we must get food. So my guest is still with me. Rebecca Oluwaponmile is still with us, but the message is waiting. So let's throw the messages in the mix, and then we'll come back to just wrap the conversation. I've got Austin left us from Austin from Satellite has got a message. He's been following now, and he says, honestly, I'm tired of quarreling with people in the same commercial bus that move around Lagos that throw different things out of the moving vehicle. Some of them, each time I tell them not to throw things away from the vehicle window, they hardly understand. A few weeks ago, I stopped a young boy that wanted to throw something out of the vehicle. He agreed with me and dropped it on the floor. To my surprise, the man sitting closer to him and threw out the moving bus. That's it, what it says. Can you imagine that? So you can imagine some of these little bits we do become the bulk we see as
Yeah,
a major
yeah.
issue.
Yeah, yeah, and these are the things that we've been talking
Mm,
about how the things that we do have this sort of effect on the environment. But we think that, oh, it's just small thing now. Is it not
mm,
just paper? Is it not just nylon? Let me just throw it away. They'll pick it. Loma people will pick it. Why don't you just keep it in your bag?
mm,
Well, do you know how that looks on you? Imagine someone, stapling that dirt that you've thrown in the environment, stapling it on your clothes, and then you have to move around with it.
mm.
You don't have to throw it out in of the bus. You can take it to your house and dispose it in your house. But then there's another culture of ours that says, oh, you shouldn't be going around with dirt. Why? Why shouldn't you? Why? What? You have to question some things that we do these days. Like question your actions, question your attitude. Why can't I go around with that? It's in my bag. It's not like it's on my body. But if I throw it on the street, people will look at me like, oh, I'm a dirty person. Yes,
Mm.
people look at you like you're a dirty person when you throw dirt on the street. And then there have also been videos of people pouring their beans in the gutter whenever it rains.
Mm.
Come on, people, we're more developed than that now. Let's
Now,
not do
Christian,
that.
yeah, Christian has a message and he says, well, our guest says, well, look, done very well. Well done. That's what the guest, Christian is saying to you this
Thank
morning.
you.
And then it goes on to, is relating from Amur, the Fin local government area. People call, well, it says Aboki, people to pack the sand and the bottles out of the gutters. But
Mm,
they will come and pack the sand and leave the bottles there, and rain will have fall between, and then all entered back into the gutter. Now I
mm.
understand that they are selling the sand. That's why they're leaving the bottles and other items they get out of the gutter. So what's the purpose of bringing them out if it will go back in again?
You can just imagine the perspective that people have. That and the perspective that people have is that, oh, when it rains, flood will take the dirt into the ocean. And then it goes into the ocean and kills the animals,
Mm.
right? And it's a cycle of event. And it takes a lot of rethinking and reteaching of cultures that we picked up. Some people just throw death in the gutters. They don't even know why they are doing it. You need to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is this right?
Now, Wilson is here with a message following also, and he says, well, I just confess the guest is opening my eyes on the best management of the environment, and I'm really grateful. And he says, I know better. That's from Wilson to you this morning. And she
Ah,
says,
thank
like
you.
she noted, and it goes on to say, like she noted, summarizing her views, we should just be reasonable when relating with the environment because our actions and inactions are consequences that are bound to affect the abusers of the environment. This is just what we can go through so far. Now,
Yeah.
we're on the home stretch. Let's run this, just run through this in just about a minute. How can we not touch the ozone layer and how harsh the ray of the sun is to the environment? Speak
Wow.
to us about
Yeah.
how we got here in summary.
Okay. So to me, from my own perspective and from the perspective of this, discussion that we're currently having, is that the things that have contributed to the depletion of the ozone layer did not start today, but we can begin the process of ending it today. It cannot end today. That's very impossible, because we cannot just tell everyone in the world, especially cows, we cannot tell them to stop bopping. These are things that I've added, but the process can start today. So what are the things that you and I can start to do? We've been mentioning it the whole time. We need to start reusing things. We need to start reducing how we use things. Reduce how you're eating cow. Rebecca, reduce how you're eating cows. Reduce how you're eating cows. Okay, and that's beef, from beef, and all of these things that we even process. We love beef to the extent that we are now processing it into different ways. But we need to reduce our what
Yeah,
we're doing that.
go
We
ahead.
need to really think about the things that we're doing. How are the things that I'm doing? How is it affecting the sun? How is it affecting the moon? How is it affecting the environment? How is it affecting the ocean? Some things that we do even affect animals in the ocean,
Okay.
affect turtles, affect sharks. There's some research that have been found that plastic are now being found in the bloodstream of animals, even in their guts and all of that. So we need to check ourselves. Our environment have been created for us, but we shouldn't destroy it because it is for us. The things that are for us, like our clothes, our houses, and all that, we take care of them, we maintain them. How much more the environment that provides all of these things for us? So I'm calling on everyone today, especially everyone who lives in cities, to be mindful of how they use the resources in the city. The resources in the city, because the city contributes more to environmental degradation than everywhere else. So if you live in the city, you need to be more mindful of how you use things that are in the city, things that are provided for you in the city. Use it to maintain your environment, use it to maintain the community, and just maybe we can all go back to our villages eventually. I'm sure no one wants to go back to their village. We want to stay in the city, but let us keep maintaining the city and let's keep maintaining the environment. Thank you. Thank you, Smooth FM, for bringing this to everyone.
All right. On this note, we want to once again assure those who've got beef on their table this morning. The table, I hope it's not the beef didn't fall off in spite of the shaking of the table this morning on what we need to do in reducing the consumption and see how we can mitigate the impact on the environment. But hey, we want to say thank you to our special guest this morning, Rebecca Oluwaponmile, a
Yeah,
development researcher with focus on climate change and its adverse effect. Thank you so much. Do have yourself a great World Environment Day.
and you too. Thank you for having me.